Well, good morning, folks. It is actually Wednesday morning, and I am going to just do a couple of quick hits on topics for the last two modules. Many of you, or at least some of you, have already taken the final, so good for you all. And for those who haven't, don't let those early achievers scare you. You know, you still have plenty of time. So I just wanted to say something about. Research ethics and organizational ethics, embryonic life, and health as a human right. And this will also be a way to kind of wrap the course up and bring us full circle. So, certainly with regard to research ethics, I think that we return to a theme that we never really left, which is the idea of the dignity of the human person. And I think that one way to summarize what the text outlines for research ethics and some of what we discussed is the idea that people who are generous, and I think generous is a good word, generous enough to participate in medical research as subjects need to be treated as human beings with dignity, and that they don't sacrifice their dignity by their willingness to participate in the study. And so therefore those people need to be treated with full agency. They need to be treated as people who are making moral decisions for themselves. They need to be given as much information as they can to make a good decision without compromising the structure of the research project. So in the discussion board where I gave you the case, which is from another textbook I've used in this class before, about the psychology class, I think that sometimes students want to take that case and say that because the student is lazy, or because they put things off, or because they didn't think everything through from the beginning, that they're not entitled to the option of opting out of the research project later on. But I think that's a good example of how human dignity is always something that always stays with a person, even if they do make bad decisions. So, the person may be flawed, the person may have made what we consider to be a mistake, but they are still to be treated with dignity, and that dignity includes the right, if you will, to opt out of the project without suffering any harm as a result of it. So that's why I would say that particular research ethics problem, that it's set up structured poorly, because it does not give the people who are participating the option of ending their participation without harm. And that's funny, because I think of myself, since I'm the professor, I'm the one who's saying that we need to respect, as it were, the right to procrastinate, whereas many of the students who are looking at this do not. So with regard to organizational ethics, I would just say this is an interesting part of the text. I like it. I wish we could spend more time on it, because there's a real interesting problem here. One of the priests I worked with when I worked at the University of Scranton told me when I was in campus ministry and I was working 60-hour weeks and I was staying late and I wasn't getting work done on my dissertation to finish my PhD. And he said to me something I've never forgotten, which is that institutions don't have consciences. Institutions don't have consciences. He said, people have consciences, and this guy at the time was my supervisor, and he said, I have a conscience, and I want to treat you as well as possible, but he said, the institution doesn't have a conscience. The institution itself will not reward you or love you for putting in extra time, for doing all sorts of making sacrifices in order to be a better member of the institution. And I think that's pretty interesting when we think about institutional ethics. So what you're doing with the organizational ethics of a hospital or healthcare system, I think, is trying to create structures in which people can be more just. The structures themselves, I think, could be considered just or unjust to the degree to which they help people to be more just or unjust, right? So, you try to set up structures, and I think the case of how medical institutions handle medical error is a good example of this. You want to create structures in which it's possible for people who make honest mistakes to respond to those mistakes in an ethical, honest way, right? So the structure should encourage people to do that, and should encourage ownership of error, the possibility of forgiveness, making restitution, and so forth. And you can have structures that encourage people to do that. So I think that just structures can make people more just, or at least help people to act more justly, and that's pretty important. But at the end of the day, it's really the consciences and intent of the people that matters, and so you want to create structures that foster better decision making and try to form people to have better intentionality. So we talk about in the final module the idea of health as a human right. I firmly believe that it is sort of what I would call a robust, rich understanding of health as a human right, that all people are entitled not just to be protected from harm, but they are entitled to have access to the goods that are required for good health, and that includes good medical care. I think that basic medical care is a right. I personally think it should be provided by society, right? So in many societies, that's done by the government. That's not the case in the United States. We've moved closer to that model in the past, I would say 15, 20 years, where the laws are set up so that we're closer to a model where everybody has access to good health care. But we're obviously not there yet. And in some countries, everybody receives health care from the government. And there's certainly, many of you wrote about, or you will write about, some of the sort of difficulties with that model. But the truth is that our own system has long wait lists, has rationing of treatment. There are all sorts of life-saving treatments that aren't available to everybody because of scarcity, because of money, etc. There are long wait lists to see specialists around here, and then there are wait lists to see specialists in all sorts of different ways. And the system works that way to sort of discourage people from using what they have access to. That's how insurance works, right? The insurance company makes money if you use less healthcare. So recently, my wife and I were talking about making appointments to see a dermatologist, which we haven't done in a couple of years, and what we found out is that according to the rules of the healthcare that we have, that if you haven't seen a specialist in over 3 years, and we had seen a dermatologist about 3 years ago, and I think they told us to come back in 3 years, so it's not unusual, that we now have to get a referral from our primary care physician. And while that's not difficult to do, and I plan to do it, it's a little bit of a disincentive that's going to lead some people to not see a dermatologist on a regular basis because they just won't get that done, right? And you all know these little things we don't get done. So in our system, we have rationing, we have shortages, we have wait lists, we have people who die or whose health is hurt because they don't get care. And to my mind, I just have to be very honest with you all that the argument that you can't have medicine provided by the government because there'll be long wait lists because people won't get care, well, that's all true now, right? And maybe if the system was being run by someone who wasn't trying to make money, that is an insurance company, but rather by the government, which we hope is trying to pursue the common good for everybody, maybe the system would work more efficiently, right? In other countries, it tends to do that. On the whole, if you look at other countries where healthcare is provided by the government or by non-governmental, what they call quasi-autonomous non-governmental agency like the National Healthcare System in Great Britain, you can find in the UK a lot of examples of people waiting to get care, as you could in the United States. But on the whole, when you look at statistics across the system, people get excellent care. So that's just my opinion, but I would say that if you want to say that healthcare is a human right, then one question is, what do we mean by that? Health as a human right could mean being protected from harm. It could mean sort of a government stance with regard to creating a healthy environment in all sorts of different ways. It could mean the provision of healthcare. I personally take a robust view of that. And I think the Catholic Church does as well, suggesting that we all belong to each other, that everybody is of value without exception. And if that's the case, if everybody has human dignity and value, then everybody should have decent health care, whether they can afford it or not, and whether they appear to deserve it or not. It's a strong and challenging position. And I suspect some of you won't agree with it, and that's fine. But I would ask you to consider it, right? I'm reading a book right now by Greg Boyle, which I might require for my RLS 121 class next semester. He's a Jesuit who works with gangs in Los Angeles, and one of his philosophies is basically that one of the reasons why we have so many problems today is because we've forgotten that we all have value and we all belong to each other. So that brings us to embryonic life. And the last thing I'll say is, this is going to be like a 10-minute video, and I apologize for that, is that if we think about when life begins, I think we try to put a hard answer on that through science, and it's very difficult to do. The overturning of Roe v. Wade 2 years ago has created, I guess, is that 2 years? No, it is 3 years ago. That has created all sorts of ethical problems, right? People with ectopic pregnancies who can't get their pregnancies ended or who can't get their lives saved because to save their life would require ending a pregnancy that is by definition not viable. Ectopic pregnancies are not viable, and there is no solution that will make them viable. So in a number of cases we're beginning to see now in hospitals, women at the point of care who are being refused life-saving care, not because it would save the life of a fetus, but because it is considered illegal. And here we have a case of what I would call ideology. The technical definition of ideology is where you have the sort of dominant power of an ideological position, right? To be to be opposed to abortion under any circumstances, or on the other side, to be for abortion on demand under any circumstances. And the commitment to that position, or the commitment to that thought, that idea, leads to some pretty weird things, right? I think that's what we're seeing now. I personally would like to see a kind of a flexibility about understanding when life begins, that says that we maybe can't draw a hard, bright line at any one place, like conception, or for that matter, a first heartbeat, or for that matter, viability, and to say that when you make a decision about these things, you look at all the outcomes, you look at all the issues, you look at all of the values and the goods, and you value the life of you value embryonic life to the degree that it can be done without endangering the life or well-being of the mother. So looking at all that, I think that leads you to some complex cases, and you might say that sometimes terminating a pregnancy in the third trimester is morally acceptable, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes terminating a pregnancy in the second trimester would be morally acceptable, and sometimes it's not. The law is a blunt instrument for dealing with that sort of stuff. So we end the course then on a note of ambiguity, I think, and that's fine because there's a lot of ambiguity here, as we've learned, right? But I do think that what Catholic healthcare ethics suggests to us is that if we keep at the forefront the idea of the value of human life, the universal notion of human dignity, and to that, new to us now, I would add the idea that we belong to each other, that we should take care of and watch out for each other, that will lead us to make good decisions. I hope you enjoyed the course. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. As always, email me if you have any questions.